Hey, hello everyone and welcome to Extreme Graphics Tech. My name is Angelo and on today's video I'm going to be answering the question that nobody asked, which is, can we play AAA games at 8K on today's best computer? So 8K is a resolution that I find at the moment, of course, and I don't know in like I don't see it in a close future something, but at the moment I find that it's completely unusable and ridiculous and unnecessary. However, there are some panels, TV panels, being sold as 8K, and the reason I think it's ridiculous is because 8K resolution, there is absolutely no content for it. Maybe in Japan there is something, like some transmissions or so on, but in general, the 8K content is basically inexistent. So there is no point on having an 8K TV if you're not going to feed it with 8K content. Otherwise, what's the point of it? Also, because when you see like streaming platforms, they are always trying to save bandwidth. And right now, even at 4K resolution, any Blu-ray, Ultra HD Blu-ray blows out of the water the quality of any streaming service, because they are not going to be serving you 60 or 80 or even 50 megabit movies. They try to compress them as much as possible, and that makes that you lose a lot of detail. So yeah, there is really no way to consume 8K content, except if you have a very powerful computer, which is maybe the only way that you're going to get some sort of 8K content. However, if you have the money to buy an 8K monitor, computer, TV, sorry, of course, that means that you probably also have the money to buy like a very high-end computer, because that's the only way you're going to actually take some advantage. The question is, however, are we able to play any AAA games? Because if you're going to have the top-end computer, I doubt that this person is going to want to play at the lowest settings possible, because what's the point of having higher resolution with the worst graphic quality that the game can give you? I would prefer to play a 4K in that case than playing at 8K, but because I have better like I can activate ray tracing and so on. So on this on today's experiment, my idea is to play some AAA games using the highest settings possible. Some of them we are going to be playing with the results and just to see what we can get. Of course, we are going to have to use technologies like FSR or DLS and even frame generation in order to achieve this, but it's to try to see how feasible it is to play 8K game on today's top-end computer, which in my case is a Ryzen 7950 X3D with an RTX 49. So let's go and see what my results were, and then I come back as usual with the conclusions. And we start with Alan Wake 2. I honestly thought this game was not going to run at all at 8K, and in this case it did at max settings, as we said we are going. There are some glitches, as you can see. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a weird glitch on the screen happening. But anyway, the game ran at around 30 FPS, which is not bad, even though we're using the DLSS Ultra Performance. That means it's running internally at 1440p and then rescaling to 8K, which when you think about it is crazy, because we're scaling from like 3.5 million pixels to 33 million pixels. So that's like 10 times more pixels that the resolution is using internally. It's just insane. Then Avatar was another game I wasn't expecting to run this well, to be honest, at 8K, even if we have to use DLSS Ultra Performance, because we're running at Ultra, and these games uses ray tracing. So we are running at around 45 to 60 FPS, which is not bad. And as you can see, the image looks very, very clean. I don't know what sort of a screen you're using, but if you're using a 4K screen, maybe run this video at 8K, because you're going to get the best quality, even if the game is, your screen is a 4K. But yeah, I'll say I was surprised, and it's absolutely playable because we are still using the ultra settings here. I'm having decent performance, not perfect 60 by any means, but it's quite a decent performance. Horizon Forbidden West, and now I tested this at native first, and it's what you're seeing here. We are not at 30 FPS, we are very close, considering we're using the very high preset. It's quite a good achievement from my point of view. Of course, I wouldn't recommend anyone to play this way, because as I said, it's not very stable. but it's still, you know, quite surprising to see that the game is even able to get to 30 FPS, and we're going to see why later. But here then we go to ultra performance, and the game runs at close to 60 FPS at very high, which is again very good. And if you as I said, the image is incredibly clean. However, as you can see, even though the internal resolution is 1440p, we barely hit 60 FPS, and that's because probably the cost of the DLSS to transform or to upscale from 1440p to 8K has to be quite high, and it takes a lot of time to do it, and that's why even though internally it's 1440p, we are barely double the FPS going from 30 to 8K, from DLSS ultra performance to, you know, 8K. So that's something to take into consideration. And as I was saying before, you see here, for example, we are barely at 10 FPS on Dying Light 2, and this is using RT Ultra, of course. And you can say, well, this game uses ray tracing, which is true, but we know how well optimized this game is now, and even then at 8K native we barely get to around 10 to 13 FPS, which is obviously unplayable. And I wouldn't say that anybody should play the game like this, but as a curiosity, it's quite interesting. Now, when we use performance, unfortunately this game doesn't support the ultra performance preset, or I couldn't make it work because there is nowhere on the options. Then we get to around 30 FPS. So yeah, it's playable on an 8K screen, but to be honest, if you had an 8K screen, I don't think you will want to play at 30 FPS. However, as a curiosity, or to see how, you know, a sort of native image looks on the screen, it should be quite amazing, or quite a sight. It's still, you know, it's a little bit more than 30, and it probably is going to be lower than 30 in certain places, but well, you know, it's technically playable. So that's a very good results again for this sort of technology, considering we're using RT Ultra here, and you know, with everything set on. Now I use frame generation on this one, but to be honest, because if you've checked the previous videos, you can see the amount of VRAM, maybe not on this one because the counter is very small, but if you see the VRAM we have been using, it's using almost all the 24 gigabytes of VRAM. So when you activate frame generation, it needs even more VRAM, which means that it's going to be very slow because the bandwidth for that amount of pixel has to be quite high. And as you can see, we didn't double the frame rate, going from around 30 at, you know, DLSS performance to and using frame generation. When we use frame generation, we barely gain like 50%. So I don't know, I wouldn't play like this, to be honest. Now, as I showed before, while playing 8K native The Last of Us Part 1, this is what I get, around 2 to 3 FPS in this closed area, which is quite crazy. I restarted the game many times, so I don't know, and I'm going to discard this as a bug or a problem on my system, but to be honest, this is sort of what I got when I was playing this at Ultra on the RTX 4090, while using the DLSS Ultra Performance goes to more than 40 FPS, which is strange, all things compared, how much we gain from this game compared to other games. So there has to be either an issue with the game, maybe there is so high bandwidth that that's as much as it can go, because if you see in some situations even the power usage is not as high as it should be, but I think it's just because the GPU is not receiving enough data to actually go on full usage, or some weird situation going on there. But anyway, this is now absolutely playable at 8K using the DLSS Ultra Performance with ultra quality. So I would say that's not a bad result either, but once again, I don't know if you want to play like that. Now here we have Starfield, a game that I thought it was going to perform worse, but actually was surprised to even see 24 FPS, so cinematic frame rate here when you play a native, which showed that this game is not so graphically demanding, it's more about the CPU, and in other areas it's probably going to get much better when we get to caves or places like that. Instead, when we use ultra performance, still keeping the ultra settings, we can see that the game runs, you know, quite nice, to be honest, over 50 FPS. I suppose there are areas that could go under 50, but there are also areas like caves and interiors that is probably going to shoot up to 80 or some FPS. So as we can see, this is a game that is not limited so much in many cases by the GPU, but more about CPU, because we can see here how we can go in terms of frame rate with this GPU. So yeah, another win in my book. Ratchet and Clank is a weird game because when I play in native, this game will go to like 2 FPS. But now the same situation is happening here where we're getting 40 something FPS. What's also weird is that you cannot change any DLSS setting while in game because the frame rate will tank to like 2 FPS. You cannot do that, at least on my situation. I had to restart the game every single time I wanted to test, because if I went from DLSS quality to DLSS ultra performance or to native or anything like that, no matter what, the frame rate will tank to 2 or 0 FPS. So it will stay there and you have to wait and it will never recover. So this game needs to be restarted when playing at 8K. Spider-Man Miles Morales, a game that I think is very well optimized, and as you can see here, using the very high preset with ray tracing on max settings, we get around 24 FPS. Yes, it's not playable in any imaginable way, but considering the resolution, the ray tracing, and that is native, I think it's not a bad result. Maybe the 5090 will be able to take us to above 30 FPS while playing native. But when we play, and this is probably not the best place to test, but when we play with DLSS Ultra Performance, we can see that we can get 60 and above. So that's not that bad, okay? But as again, the main problem is I don't have an 8K screen, so it looks quite clean here, but we're going from 3 million pixels to 33, and the question is how good it will look on an 8K screen that is probably going to be like 80 inches or so. So yeah, we can play. Now the question is it good enough to play like that? And I am not convinced, even though in my 4K screen it looks extremely clean. Well, and as you can see, playing at 8K is possible, but it's not recommended, at least in my eyes. I think 4K is still the higher resolution that anyone should go on, at least most games, especially if they are AAA games. However, I have to say that I was more surprised about some of the findings. For example, some of the games I thought they were not going to even move at 1 frame per second, they were running even at 30 FPS, of course using low settings in that particular case, and super resolution DLSS and ultra performance, but still I thought they were not going to play at all. And I have to say that even in those situations, playing 8K, even using DLSS ultra performance in my 4K monitor, they look really crisp, really detailed, really good, even better than a 4K native. Even if I was using DLSS ultra performance, the quality of the image was really, really good. Of course, the performance is really low, so I will never play in that way. I prefer to play with 4K DLSS quality, for example, than at 8K DLSS ultra performance, just because of the performance. But I think image quality wise, clarity, it look better than even 4K quality, at least on my eyes. Now, even though I am testing on a 4K monitor, as you can see, the recordings on this video is supposed to be at 8K, because what I'm doing is I'm recording the internal resolution of the game, and then the computer is downsampling to my 4K resolution, but you can see this video at 8K, okay? So if you have it, or even if you want to test it. In any case, I think 8K is an interesting experiment, but I don't think it's a feasible resolution, not now, because we're moving from 8 million pixel, which is 4K, to 33 million pixels, that is 8K. So that's 4 times more pixels, and you don't need only 4 times more power, but also a lot more bandwidth, because cramming 33 million pixels on that small bandwidth memory bus is really creating a bottleneck where the GPU is probably not being fully or completely utilized, because it's too many pixels at the moment. So I don't think this is something that is going to be, even on the next generation of GPU. I think we need at least 2 or 3 generations, at least for bandwidth to grow enough for 33 million pixels to pass like it's nothing, not creating any bottleneck. Then I don't know if we will have the GPU power still to move those games, at least not from that era. But still, the first thing we need to change is memory bandwidth. But talking about memory, also we need more VRAM, a lot more VRAM, at least double the VRAM we have now. we could see on every game that they were mostly using all the 24 gigabytes of VRAM that the 4090 provides. I know that some of them were allocating more than they were actually using, but the fact is that by even allocating that much memory, the fact is we couldn't use frame generation on most of the games or any of the game because the memory was so utilized that when you activate the frame generation, which uses a lot of memory too, then the game went even slower in some cases, which is crazy when you think about it. So 24 gigabytes of VRAM is very good for 4K because even at 12 gigabytes today you can play many games 4K no issues. I have a 4070 Ti and most games run okay, but when we're talking 8K, even 24 gigabytes is not enough. So that means that for 8K to become a reasonable resolution, we will need GPUs with at least 36 or 48 gigabytes of VRAM. Think about that, 48 gigabytes of VRAM. Even many like AI GPUs today don't have that amount of VRAM, which is just insane that we are going to get to a future where we are going to have 48 gigabytes of VRAM, because we are going to get there. Of course, we were using my first 3D accelerator card had only 2 megabytes. 2 megabytes, and the first Voodoo card had 4 megabytes, if I don't remember wrong, or 8 maybe. Or the first one I think it had 4, and then the Voodoo 2 had 8. So think about it, 4 megabytes, and now we're talking 24 gigabytes on a 4090. So yeah, we are going to get to a point where 48 is going to be the normal, but until that day doesn't happen, I don't think 8K is going to be a feasible resolution. Of course, for some easy to run through indie game, that shouldn't be an issue for the 4090. But yeah, as an experiment, it was interesting. I hope you also found it interesting. As always, see you on the next video.